For the longest time, Halo fans have speculated if the franchise is ever going to make its way onto competitor hardware like Nintendo platforms or the PlayStation, and at one point there was a rumored Halo game that was supposedly coming out on the DS that may or may not have been a real thing. I've read and heard stories both ways. However, outside of official releases, Halo has had a long-lasting tradition, like many franchises, of cool mods and cool fan recreations on all sorts of platforms. And today's video is no exception to that. We are going to check out Halo Revamped, which is a Halo game playable on the PSP. And yes, you heard me right, I'm talking about the PlayStation Portable that came out back in the mid-2000s. I do just want to say before we get into the video, it's kind of two things. One, I apologize for the flickering footage. There's absolutely nothing I can do about that. It just happens. I don't know if it's a part of the emulator I'm using or if it's Halo Revamped itself. It flickers all the time, and I've tried to fix it and I can't figure out how. So I apologize for that. And like I said, I am emulating this on my PC because for me, that just makes it easier to capture footage, but this is completely playable on a PSP. With that out of the way, let's get started. Now, before we talk about Halo Revamped itself, we first just need to talk about how something like this can even exist. Through something called Homebrew, users were able to use exploits and hacks to execute unsigned code on the PSP, which allowed people to make their own games and tons of other cool things using the PSP platform. Halo Revamped in particular is self-described as an FPS inspired by the famous franchise Halo, based on the Arrrash PSP and Quake PSP engine. Arrrash being a homebrew game inspired by the game Turok that you may know of from back in the day, and then Quake, which was actually unofficially ported to the PSP. From there you can kind of understand the super quick framework of what Halo Revamped is. Basically, it's a Halo-inspired FPS running on the Quake engine that had been unofficially ported to the PSP. The fact that you can even string this sentence together is absolutely crazy. Let's now get into the features of Halo Revamped, and then toward the end of the video we're going to actually jump in and play some Halo Revamped live because it's an absolute treat and I want you guys to experience that with me. So for a Halo-inspired fan creation, Halo Revamped actually has a lot of content, but before we kind of get into that content, let's quickly talk about kind of the game in general and kind of how it plays. So first off, I want to talk about the controls. If you've ever played a first-person shooter on the PSP, you'll kind of understand how this game controls, but since PSPs don't have multiple thumbsticks, you're going to use the left thumbstick to move, and then you actually have to use the face buttons to aim left, right, up, down, which ends up feeling pretty terrible if you're used to playing a first-person shooter on regular consoles or if you're used to playing on a PC. Other than that, I would say it pretty much controls okay. So those controls, along with the fact that this is a game that ran on the PSP, I'm sure you can kind of imagine there's just general clunkiness to it. It's not a super well polished first-person shooter, but you kind of have to expect that with one, a first-person shooter just period on the PlayStation Portable, and then two, I mean, this is a recreation using the Quake engine to kind of create Halo, so you weren't going to get absolutely perfect and polished gameplay. So as long as you go into this with that in mind, you'll still be able to enjoy the game despite the general clunk and general just jankness of the game itself. So the game does have 3 game modes that are playable. There's Firefight, SWAT, and Slayer, and then there's actually 4 different categories of maps. And while some of these maps are more suited for specific game modes, you can just play any of the game modes on any of the maps. So Firefight, I'm sure you guys all know what that is, but basically you just fight different Covenant enemies. So far all I have seen in this game is different elites and grunts, but maybe if you play for a long time other types of enemies appear, but those are the 2 types of enemies that I saw, and then you basically just kill them repeatedly until, I don't know, you get bored and switch levels or whatever. And then SWAT and Slayer, these are multiplayer modes. Now, technically in the menu, there is a section for online play where you can put in an IP and possibly get that to work. I did not try to get that to work. So what I did was I just spawned bots into all the lobbies that I play in, and you can set the bots on multiple different difficulties. There's easy, normal, heroic, legendary, just like you'd be familiar with from Halo, and you can just run around and kill the bots on the different maps, playing the different game modes. Now, SWAT is pretty much exactly what you would expect. It's I think at least one shot to the head will kill you. It's so hard for me to actually shoot people in the head in this game that I'm not sure if it is. But there actually is this weird slowdown mechanic in SWAT that you can use, and it kind of slows down time. I don't know why that got thrown in there. And then Slayer is pretty much exactly what you would expect it to be. Hopping over to the maps, there are different sections of maps like I told you. So the first section of maps is the revamped maps, and these I'm pretty sure come directly from this specific game. And there's Small Maze, which is just a little maze, Trap Bridges, which are these two different bridges that kind of go across the sky, similar to some of those original Halo CE levels. That's kind of what it makes me think of when I'm playing it, and there's little holes in the bridges where you can fall through. Then there's a small 2v2 map called Base Station 118. It's just a small little arena style map. There's a map called Flaming Ice Best Map. I have no clue why it's called that. Then there's a remake of Chill Out from Halo CE, which is pretty cool. A remake of Lockout, although the Lockout map is not complete. There's no top blue or bottom blue or anything like that. A remake of Prisoner from Halo CE. A remake of I want to say it's called Rat's Nest from Halo CE. A remake of Foundation from Halo 2. And then a remake of The Pit from Halo 3. All of these maps have varying degrees of performance, sometimes based on the map itself, and then sometimes it just seems like it performs differently based on when I launch it and how it feels like performing at that given time. One map that I always had problems with out of this specific section is Prisoner. For some reason, Prisoner always ran like absolute poop, so I don't know if that one is kind of lacking on the optimization front. Then there's one minigame map, which actually, for being a weird minigame map, is pretty fun. Basically, there's this weird box in the middle, and I probably should know what this is, but for whatever reason, I can't tell what it is. And then there's little needles that kind of just fly around the level, and you can run around and shoot enemies on it while you play, or you can just try and avoid the needles if you don't spawn any bots. Then there's the 6 firefight maps. These are all just basically different locales. There's a building section, basically just straight up spawn map called Test Spawn, a desert strike map, which is a more deserty map, a town square map, which is pretty self-explanatory, a landing pad map, and then there's a cliff construct map, which, as you can see from the footage, looks super weird. I don't know if it's supposed to look like this, but I wasn't a fan of this one. And then moving on to the last section of maps, there's the maps that are labeled Solitude. Now, from the research I was able to do, and it's really hard to actually find information about these games. They're buried in old forum posts and like different comment sections of videos, so it's not really easy to find out information about these games unless you already knew about them. But I believe Solitude was a different Halo PSP project that maybe got canceled or maybe just got wrapped into this one. I'm not 100% sure there. And this one has 3 different maps. There's Spider's Web, which is a weird map. I think that's supposed to resemble a spider's web, and there's a grav lift in the middle that you can jump up to the top. Then there's Maniac, which is just another original map. And then there's Narrowed, which is Narrows from Halo 3 but kind of shrunk down a little bit, and it doesn't have the man cannons, so they probably had to repurpose it a bit, I am assuming, to be able to run in this game or in Solitude for that game. So that kind of wraps up all of the features and kind of just how the game generally plays. Now, to fully experience this game, you kind of just have to see it in action. So I'm going to hop in, we're going to play a couple different game modes and levels and just check it out. Alright, for the gameplay section, I thought we'd hop into the remake of The Pit and just play some Slayer for the first part, and then we'll kind of check out the firefight mode in the second part, just because I thought playing a well-liked classic map from the Halo franchise would be a cool one to check out. Now, I did forget to mention during the scripted part, I was unable to get this to work with mouse and keyboard. I don't know if you can use mouse and keyboard with this emulator, but I'm just playing with a controller, so maybe there's a way to get mouse and keyboard to work, and then you don't have to deal with aiming with the face buttons and everything. But like I said, I'm just playing with a controller, and as you can see, it is a struggle to aim, to say the least. Now, I will say, at first when I played this game, I absolutely despised it, but the weird thing is, the more you play this, and I won't lie and tell you I've played like tons of hours, because I mean, I am literally just shooting at bots in a really, really weird version of Halo, but the more I played it, like the more the charm of the game kind of gets to you, and you kind of grow like a weird admiration for the project. I can only imagine how cool this would have been to play back in the day on your PSP, maybe even with other buddies. I think that would have been really cool, especially if you were someone that either like was a huge Halo fan and wanted to play it handheld, or maybe you weren't even a Halo fan and this was like your first entrance to the franchise, and you could kind of experience some of the classic maps, see some of the classic guns that we're all familiar with in a handheld setting. Alright, I think that kind of shows off just the general premise of the Slayer game mode. So let's hop into Firefight here. You can kind of see this one, so here's a little grunt. Like I said, I've only encountered grunts and elites so far, but maybe if you play more, you can encounter different enemy types. I'm not totally sure, but from my experience, it is just elites and grunts. And they kind of sound a little off in certain spots. Like, they do have a lot of the sound effects that you'd be familiar with, but occasionally they make this weird sound that I haven't been able to pinpoint what it is. They pretty much just run at you. I mean, you can't expect super advanced AI from a project like this, but yeah, you just run around, you shoot them. I mean, it's nothing super special, but it's kind of fun. You can waste some time doing it, and it keeps track of your score in the corner. I'm not totally sure if it actually gets harder as you play like regular Firefight does in Reach or ODST, but you kind of just run around and kill them repeatedly until you get bored or until you die. Alright guys, and that's going to kind of wrap it up for the gameplay section of the video. So overall, is Halo Revamped actually a good game? Well, I feel I would be lying to you if I said that it was, and if we're being honest, a lot of that just has to do with how much I dislike shooters on the PSP due to the lack of 2 joysticks. However, despite this, just it existing is extremely cool. Not only did a group of people work together to literally recreate Halo using Quake, they did this on the PSP of all things. And it seems that people have gone even a step further and ported this to other handhelds like the 3DS and other consoles like the Dreamcast. So even though I would describe Halo Revamped as jank, I do truly recommend that you check it out for yourself, because I had a total blast just experiencing this game while I was playing it and doing research for this video. Like I mentioned at the start of the video, you don't actually need a PSP to play this game. You can download a PSP emulator and it'll run just fine for you. In the description, I'll link the emulator I used and the link to the game download itself, and you basically just download the game, unzip it, and throw it into the game folder in the emulator, and it launches right up. All you have to do is when you start the game, you hit start. I got stuck on the starting screen for the longest time because it has an error message and I thought it was just broken. So yeah, that's pretty much going to wrap up the video. I do just want to put a disclaimer here at the end. Like I said, finding information for this game is sort of a pain, so feel free to fact check points that I made in the comments. I tried my best, but this game really is just buried in old forum posts. So if you know more about this project, feel free to enlighten me and the other watchers and readers in the comment section. As always, if you enjoyed the video, you know what to do. If you want to catch me live, sometimes I stream games on Twitch, or if you'd rather just read some of my random thoughts, you can follow me over on Twitter. And I'll see you all next time.